In the stickball games, I was switch hitting left and right and cracking the pink ball and getting on base and stealing bases. And I didn't understand because some of the latest Jacksons that had been signed weren't hitting the ball as far or as often. And as more of them got signed and not me, the good players on the playground eased up on their woofing when I was at bat. For they knew what was happening and why I could not be chosen. Some years back, a coach had been stabbed for bringing in a ringer Dominican that was 1 year past the cutoff. Some fan who lost a lot of money because of that boy's hitting found out and lost it and ran down out of the bleachers and just let the coach have it right in the gut. I was too young. That was against the rules. I was a risk to people's safety. Now, probably would not make a difference. Nobody wanted to take any chances. Lights popped on and peppered the projects around us as merengue and salsa and screams and laughs drifted out of the lit squares and off the stoops. My daddy got down on one knee and clang, clang, clang. The secret knock on the metal doors like the Chinaman at the stationery store had told us. The trees swayed and the breeze touched our faces and the different dinner smells were in our noses. And my daddy looked at the crumpled white paper and the closed-up store and down at me and the metal doors and said, maybe this isn't it. I didn't know what to say because the Chinaman across 100 knew just about everything. And I wanted to play, and this was it. And we looked down because there was a clang, 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 clang coming from the metal doors. We stepped back and my daddy clang, clang, clang again. And the metal mouth in the middle of the sidewalk opened up. A head popped up and out, and his eyes eyed us. And my daddy said, we want to see Rodrigo. The eyes eyed us and stopped on me. And a hand came up and waved us down. My daddy held on to the sidewalk and cinched his head to the side as he descended the small and narrow stairs. He turned around and said, come on. Because looking down into the dark, I wasn't so sure if I wanted to go. I took a step and then another and heard the Puerto Rican man closing the doors, and the salsa and merengue became dull and muffled, and I could feel him walking behind me, and I could see only black in front of my face. I went slowly, trying to feel my hands along the wall, testing each step with a dangled dipped foot, stepping only when I felt stare beneath me. Near the bottom, I could smell the cigarette and cigar smoke as my eyes adjusted to the one light bulb hanging in the middle of the dark basement. I saw the smoke lingering around the light and the 4 Puerto Rican men sitting at a table, a round table with their eyes and ears focused on my dad. My dad was talking. There was a little transistor in the corner playing salsa. I heard the men on the radio wailing in their song. I stopped, and the man who let us down said, pardon, and went to the table and sat down on a large fruit box turned on end at the table. It was what they all sat on. I looked around and there were boxes and crates and silver kegs leading all over, going deep into the corners until you couldn't see anything. The floor sloped down, and I looked at the little drain at my feet and saw another near a half-shadowed silver keg, and another near one of their sneakers, and saw a red baseball sock and a red hat like the 4 men had on the floor near a crate, and looked on top of another crate and said, ah. There were a bunch of gray baseball pants next to a pile of red hats, next to a couple of stacks of red socks, and a long line of gray and red baseball shirts with red numbers and large red letters saying Malta Shackle, the best team in the league. I looked over, and the men were all turned and looking at me, and my dad was saying he can hit anything on both sides. He's better than almost all those kids on that playground. You know, you seen him. And four of the men spoke Spanish among themselves, and the man who let us down was shaking his head no and talking loud, and the others spoke loud at him. And my dad pulled out his wallet, and a bunch of dollars came out, and the men all went quiet. Watched him. The four men looked at my dad, and then at the man who let us in, who'd been shaking his head. My dad put the stack of dollars on the table. The man with a cigar who said nothing counted the money. He looked at my dad. He smiled. The man who let us in started to say something, and the cigar man did a one-handed safe motion, and all went quiet, except the salsa playing on the radio in the corner. He looked at my dad and smiled again. He looked over at me and smiled, and took out a cigar, and in a heavy Spanish accent said, "Come, Maceo," as he waved me over with his fingers, moving rapidly at himself. "You can hit, huh? Both sides. And throw? Well, you see me play stickball? We'll teach you, and you'll become the next Roberto Clemente, yeah? Rodrigo," he said, "go get the papers. Maceo, go pick a number. 2 to 5 are the smallest." He looked back at my father and the money on the table, and I went over to the uniforms, and he said, "I know a man who will make him a new certificate, and nobody will know. And if they ask, we will have a proof. He has done it before for me. With training, your boy will make a fine ball player, a fine multi-shelf player with some training." Above ground with my new uniform and the iron mouth and the sidewalk closed, we walked home. My dad laughed and put his arm around my shoulder and said, "And now you have to play as good as I told him you could play." And he giggled some more about something I didn't understand. My mom let her long legs spread wide and her arms fall loose in between as she rocked her head back and laughed so you could see her teeth and dimples that came out only during the good times. She looked at me and smiled. "Oh, son, it'll look fine," she said as she tugged and pulled down my uniform, shirt, and pants. She clenched the sewing needle in between her lips and looked up at me standing on the fold-out wood card table chair, looking down and out of the big living room window at the yellow cabs and long buses racing down Columbus Avenue. The shirt came down too far on pants too long and baggy, so though I had on red baseball socks that fit, you couldn't see them, for the gray pants passed my socked feet. I stood on the chair, feeling the morning sun on my face, smelling the grits simmering and the bacon crackling in the kitchen as my dad tended the stove singing "You'll Never Find" along with Lou Rawls on the record player. The day was going to be a warm one, and my mom was excited, and my dad was all smiles, and I was neither smiles nor excited, because I'd learned quickly that month baseball wasn't stickball. Organized sports with grown-up coaches didn't go by playground rules. I stood on the chair as the sun came down and the buses and the cars raced by, and my mop tugged and pulled, and my dad cooked and sang, and the bacon popped and crackled, and I went over and over all the man with the cigar and red hat had been telling and teaching me. He meant to make good on making me a Roberto Clemente. Elbow up, get in front of the ball, get down on the ball. The ball don't hurt when it hits you. Mitt open. No swinging on the first pitch. Watch the spin of the pitch. Concentrate. Watch the batter stance. Take a hop to be on your toes. Always hit the cutoff man. Take your time. Pay attention. Don't lead too far. Round third like this. Keep your concentration. Attack the ball. Level swing. Square for the bunt. It doesn't hurt. Well, only for a little does it hurt. It all swished and sloshed around in my head as I went over and over his words, sometimes remembering all, sometimes less, sometimes not understanding at all. The man with the cigar, the coach, had at one time come very close to the big leagues. They didn't like too many Spanish on their teams then, he'd say. He had played many years and was patient, but pushing. He knew his stuff. so as to make my pop very pleased with my progress in the fundamentals. My pop had been very good and had played for many years, coming very close to the big leagues till he broke his leg his last year in college. My dad's youngest brother, Uncle Marvin, who now lived in Brooklyn, had been very good and had made the big leagues by hitting 7 out of 12 balls out of Three River Stadium in Pittsburgh. The Pirates wanted him. But something happened and he didn't want to play professional sports, which nobody, especially my pop, could understand. The coach said I reminded him of himself when he was my age. My pop said my swing looked just like Marvin's when he was at that age. Uncle Marvin out of Brooklyn said again and again, if I kept working on the fundamentals, I'd be the best Watson ball player of all. My uniform fit good, but I didn't care because I was on the bench and had not played as the sixth inning rolled on and the other team cracked another hit. There was a smell of hot dogs and sauerkraut and hot pretzels with mustard, and the trees in Central Park swished and swayed with the breeze as the man with the cigar and red hat puffed away and screamed out of the corner of his mouth and 3 times trounced upon his hat on the calls going the other way. His red hat was dusty with infield brown dirt. People cheered and jeered and pointed at me sitting alone at the end of the bench, dangling my feet back and forth. They didn't touch the ground unless I sat near the edge of the bench and really tried. I kept my head down, watching my white and light blue new Nike canvas tennis shoes getting dirtier and dirtier as I occasionally kicked up a plume of infield dirt with my toes for no good reason. The old Spanish men were there, and mothers and wives and girlfriends, and the men with red hats from the basement, and the next teams getting ready to play, eating hot dogs and popcorn and pretzels and Italian shaved ices, with babies sleeping on laps and shoulders of women with other kids not too much younger than me running around playing freeze tag behind the bleachers. There were cheers from the other side set of bleachers, a lot of talking Spanish on our side, with the men gesturing with outstretched hands and palms slapping heads and eyes occasionally rolling up to heaven. The man with the cigar chomp, chomp, as he screamed, "Boya" and "Puta," as strikes came our way and long balls went against us, and my new white canvas shoes got dirty red-brown, swinging back and forth, kicking up dust. 1, 2, 3, we were out. And the man with the cigar said, "Oh, deal," and some other things, and he shook his head back and forth and looked over at the end of the bench and said in heavy Spanish accent, "Messi a la derecha," which I come to learn meant right field. I saw my mitt against the bat, against the steel wire fence. I grabbed it and ran as fast as I could to the outfield. My mom stood up and screamed, "Go, Maceo!" and clapped as I waved to her from right field. Seemed like as soon as I was out there, our team was back on the bench. Somebody was up and got a hit. There were cheers. Somebody else cracked and loud cheers. 3 or 4 more crack, 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 crack. And the men on the other bleachers were making the hand gestures and eyes to God, and the women with their babies on their shoulders on our side were up and cheering now, so their babies were awake and crying, and the men were nodding in approval, showing one another the last swing and the flight of the ball with their hands. It was the top of the 8th, and it was my turn, and people were pointing and laughing, and the first pitch came, a strike. The second, a ball. The third, and I saw the laces spin just like he said. Crack! Cheers! And I watched it rise over the second baseman's head. "Run, Maceo, run!" I heard my mom say above it all, and I was off and on first. The coach was clapping, and my mom was jumping and cheering, and the men from the basement were watching very closely, for the other team was not supposed to be this good, but we were within 1 run now and might make everything all right and square with the bets they'd made. Fat Black Charles came up and he must have got his weight behind it. The ball soared. I went as fast as I could round the bases, just as the cigar man had said, and the people on our side went wild, standing, waving their hats and fists and red and white Malta Sheriff pennants, chanting Malta, clap, 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 Sheriff, clap, clap, clap. As fat black Charles just trotted slow and easy around third. The ball was gone way over the fence. Our rally was done, and we were ahead by 1. And all eyes were on the coach at the mound, because our pitcher had just hit a kid, and his arm was spaghetti. But we didn't have anybody else who could throw nearly as hard. He threw one high, and another too low, and another one hopped off the ground. And our coach was back out again, and I don't know what he said to him. The coach came out again, and I smelled the hot dogs and sauerkraut from the hot dog cart and thought of lunch and how good it'd be to have a hot dog. And I heard the kids behind the bleachers laughing and screaming, playing freeze tag. And I saw a baby girl stumble and fall on the paved walkway with her mother quickly going to rescue. It was hot, and they'd only mowed the grass on the other side of the paved walkway, and I looked down at the dandelions and I wondered why. They were big and tall and yellow, and I went after them, kicking their heads right off. And away they flew up, and they were gone in the breeze. Then I jumped up and crunched the stems, and then I was doing 360 spins on yellow heads and green stems, and I tried it with my eyes closed, and around and around and around on one of those dandelions, and then there was a crack from somewhere. There was a crack, and the man with the cigar was screaming, "Maceo, Maceo, puto Dios, Maceo." And the people were all over everywhere screaming. And women were shrieking and babies crying. The men in hats from the basement were standing half up, hands mushing red hats on their heads. And everybody was pointing this way and that way in my direction.